The bell above Thompson Firearms and Outdoor had rung 43 times that Friday afternoon, each chime marking another customer wandering into the low-lit space, smelling of gun oil and sawdust. Most came for ammunition, few for accessories, fewer still for actual firearms. By 4:30, the October light, slanting through the front windows, had turned the color of old honey, casting long shadows across the worn pine floorboards that creaked under every step. Haven Ridge, Nebraska, wasn't the kind of town where much happened after dark, which meant Friday afternoons carried a particular weight, last chance to handle business before the weekend swallowed everything whole. Behind the counter, 3 young men occupied themselves with the kind of conversation that fills empty hours. Edward Harris, who went by Ed to anyone who'd listen, leaned back against the ammunition display with his phone angled just right to catch his reflection in the darkened screen. At 24, he'd cultivated an image he thought projected success. Hair gelled back in precise lines, a watch that cost more than he'd admit, boots that had never seen actual dirt. He worked part-time while finishing a marketing degree at Chadron State, and he made sure everyone knew both facts within 10 minutes of meeting him. The debate today centered on Nebraska Cornhuskers football, specifically whether the coaching staff understood anything about fourth-quarter adjustments. Ed held forth with the confidence of someone who'd never called a play in his life, but had watched enough ESPN to feel qualified. Timothy Clark sat on a stool near the register, half listening, mostly focused on the inventory spreadsheet open on the computer. At 22, Tim had the kind of face that made people underestimate him. Baby fat, still softening his jawline, freckles scattered across a nose that burned red, every summer hair that refused to stay combed. He'd been working at Thompson's for 4 months, saving every paycheck toward welding certification at the community college. His father had died when Tim was 16, which meant he'd learned early that opinions mattered less than paychecks, and arguing about football coaches fell firmly in the former category. Jacob Walker, 26 and built like the linebacker he'd been in high school, stood behind the counter cleaning a Remington 8.7. Oh, someone had traded in that morning. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, breaking down the shotgun, wiping each component, reassembling with the kind of muscle memory that came from repetition rather than expertise. He'd been the star of Haven Ridge High's 2016 team, the guy who everyone said would go somewhere, right up until he didn't. The scholarship offers had been too small, his grades too low, and somewhere between graduation, and now he'd settled into a comfortable resentment of anyone who looked like they might have it easier. Have you ever dismissed someone before, knowing their story? The question hung in the air, unspoken, invisible. The kind of truth that only reveals itself in hindsight when the damage is already done. The phone on the counter chirped at 4:35, cutting through Ed's monologue about defensive formations. Tim reached for it automatically, wedging the receiver between shoulder and ear while his fingers kept moving across the keyboard. A woman's voice came through, warm but efficient, the kind of tone that suggested she'd called businesses like this 1,000 times before. Her words were simple, direct. "Thompson Firearms, this is Susan Miller calling. Is Brian Thompson available?" Tim glanced toward the parking lot, empty except for Ed's Accord and Jacob's lifted F-150. "Out on delivery, ma'am. Should be back around 5. Can I take a message?" The voice on the other end paused just a beat, then continued with the same pleasant firmness. "Just tell him Rick's stopping by around 5 to pick something up. He'll know what I mean. Tim scribbled on the notepad they kept by the register, "Rick Miller, 5 p.m. pickup." "Got it, ma'am. I'll let him know." He set the receiver down and pushed the note toward the edge of the counter where Brian would see it first thing. Ed had already resumed his analysis of Saturday's game, and Jacob had moved on to inspecting the shotgun's bore with a flashlight. Neither one looked up. The note sat there, ink drying information waiting to matter. Outside Main Street carried its usual late afternoon rhythm. A few pickup trucks angled into diagonal parking spots. Someone's dog barked from the bed of a Silverado 3 doors down. The hardware store across the street had already flipped its sign to closed, but the owner's truck still sat out front, which meant he was probably in the back doing paperwork he'd been putting off all week. Thompson Firearms occupied a brick building that had housed different businesses over the decades: a pharmacy in the 40s, a department store in the 60s, an antique shop that lasted exactly 11 months in the early 2000s. Brian Thompson had bought it in 2018 with money he'd saved from his Army years and a small business loan he was still paying down. The interior kept some of the old character-pressed tin ceiling tiles, painted white original wood floors that dipped slightly toward the northwest corner windows with the kind of wavy glass you couldn't buy anymore. The inventory ran practical rather than exotic. Hunting rifles dominated the long gun racks, Remingtons and Winchesters and Rugers. Nothing fancy, all workhorses. The handgun case held the standards Glock Smith and Wesson Sig Sauer, a few revolvers for the old-timers who didn't trust anything without a wheel. Ammunition filled an entire wall, organized by caliber boxes, stacked with the precision of someone who understood that disorder cost money. Brian had rules clear and simple, posted on a wooden sign behind the register that he'd carved himself during his first winter in business. Every customer gets respect from ranchers to doctors. No exceptions, no excuses. He'd trained Ed and Tim and Jacob on those rules their first day, made them repeat it back to him, made it clear that keeping this job meant following that principle. But Brian also knew that rules without enforcement were just suggestions, and lately he'd been spending more time out of the shop handling deliveries, meeting with suppliers, trusting his employees to hold the standard. Today marked the 4th Friday in a row he'd been gone during the afternoon shift. Ed had noticed, so had Jacob. The clock above the register clicked over to 4:47. 13 minutes until 5. The sun had dropped low enough that the front windows caught its direct glare, turning the glass into mirrors that reflected the shop's interior back at itself. Tim squinted at the screen, trying to reconcile the inventory count with what actually sat on the shelves. Ed had moved on from football to complaining about a professor who'd given him a B- on a marketing presentation. Jacob set the cleaned shotgun aside and reached for a can of Red Bull, the hiss of carbonation briefly louder than Ed's voice. Stephen Scott stood near the rifle scopes, methodical in his examination of a Leupold 5th X3. At 52, he carried himself with the kind of posture that spoke to years of deliberate practice: shoulders back, spine, straight feet planted, shoulder width apart even when standing still. His hair had gone gray at the temples, but remained thick enough that he didn't bother hiding it under a cap. The Carhartt jacket he wore had faded from chocolate brown to something closer to rust, and the hands turning the scope over had calluses in places that suggested he worked with tools more than keyboards. Stephen had been coming to Thompson's since Brian first opened, usually on Fridays, usually in the late afternoon. He bought a box of 308 Winchester every other week, sometimes a cleaning kit, once a new rifle sling. He didn't make small talk, didn't linger longer than necessary, paid in cash, and left. Brian knew him by name because Brian made it his business to know his regulars. The three young men behind the counter knew him by sight, but had never bothered to learn anything more. The bell rang at 4:52. A man stepped through the door, and the afternoon light behind him rendered him a silhouette for the first 3 steps, average height, slightly stooped shoulders, the outline of a baseball cap. As he moved deeper into the shop, details emerged: work boots that had seen years of honest use. Jeans faded not by fashion but by washing, a flannel shirt in blue and black checks that hung loose over a frame that had probably carried more weight in younger years. Ed glanced up from his phone, sized up the newcomer in the space of 2 seconds, and returned his attention to the screen. Jacob looked over, registered the same assessment, and reached for his energy drink. Tim, still focused on the inventory spreadsheet, offered a small nod toward the door without making eye contact. The man approached the counter with steps that suggested he'd spent most of his life covering ground at exactly this pace. Not hurried, not slow, just the steady rhythm of someone who understood that rushing rarely helped and stopping meant falling behind. Richard Miller had turned 63 that spring, though the number itself meant less than what the years had done to him. His face carried the deep lines of a man who'd worked outdoors under high-altitude sunskin, weathered to the color of old saddle leather creases, radiating from the corners of eyes that had spent decades squinting at horizons. Those eyes, a particular shade of gray-blue that seemed to shift with the light moved across the shop's interior with practiced efficiency, cataloging exits, measuring distances, noting positions without appearing to focus on anything in particular. His hair had gone completely silver, cut short enough that it barely showed beneath the John Deere cap that had faded from green to something closer to sage. The hands resting loosely at his sides showed knuckles enlarged by old breaks, fingernails cut short and clean, a pattern of calluses that belonged to someone who'd spent equal time holding tools and weapons. A scar traced a pale line along his left jawbone, barely visible beneath 2 days of white stubble. Rick stopped at the counter and waited the appropriate 3 seconds for someone to acknowledge him. When no one did, he cleared his throat once, a sound barely louder than breathing. Ed looked up this time, actually registering the man in front of him. The greeting came out automatic, professional enough to pass afternoon. "What can I do for you?" Rick's voice carried the flat neutrality of the Midwest. No drawl, no particular accent, just the sound of someone who'd learned early that clear communication prevented problems. "Looking for a handgun for home defense. Something my wife can handle comfortably. 9mm or 45, whichever you'd recommend for someone with smaller hands." The request couldn't have been more straightforward. Ed's response came with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, the kind of reflexive humor that filled space without adding value. "Home defense. Sir, you got coyotes getting into your hen house." Tim looked up from the computer, something uncomfortable flickering across his face. Jacob set down his energy drink, attention suddenly focused. Rick's expression didn't change. No smile, no frown, just the same neutral attention he'd walked in with. He waited a beat, as if considering whether the question warranted a response, then continued as though Ed hadn't spoken. Something reliable, not looking for anything fancy. Jacob pushed off from the counter, straightening to his full height, the motion deliberate enough to draw attention. His voice carried across the shop with the particular edge of someone who thought he was being clever. "Hold up there, Pops. I think you might have the wrong place. We sell firearms here, not tractor parts. Farm and Fleet's 2 blocks down on Elm Street." Ed laughed, quick and sharp. Tim's hand stopped moving on the keyboard. Stephen Scott, still standing near the scope display, turned his head slightly, attention shifting from the equipment to the interaction playing out at the counter. Rick looked at Jacob for exactly 3 seconds. No anger registered in his expression, no embarrassment, no defensive posturing. His eyes simply measured the younger man with the kind of attention someone might give to a specimen under glass, cataloging, assessing, filing away for future reference. Then he asked a question that had nothing to do with the comment Jacob had just made, his tone unchanged, still carrying that same flat neutrality. "Brian Thompson." Working today, Ed recovered first, eager to be helpful now, as if being useful might somehow balance the scales. "Boss is out on delivery. Should be back around 5:15. Rick glanced at the clock above the register, 4:54, then back to Ed. "I'll wait." The statement landed without room for negotiation. Ed blinked, processing, trying to figure out if this was normal or strange or something else entirely. "Sir, that's like 20 minutes. We can call you when he gets back if you want to." Rick cut him off with 2 words spoken in exactly the same tone as everything else he'd said. "I'll wait." He turned from the counter and walked to a chair positioned near the front window, the kind of folding metal chair with a padded vinyl seat that every small business seemed to own. He sat down with the same deliberate economy of movement he'd used to walk in, settling into the chair as though he planned to occupy it for considerably longer than 20 minutes. His hands rested on his thighs, not gripping, not fidgeting, just there. His eyes moved to the window, watching Main Street's minimal traffic with the kind of attention that suggested he found it genuinely interesting. He didn't reach for a phone, didn't pick up one of the hunting magazines stacked on the small table beside the chair, didn't adjust his position or cross his legs or give any indication that waiting bothered him in the slightest. Ed looked at Jacob. Jacob looked at Ed. Tim stared at Rick, then at his co-workers, then back at the computer screen. Jacob's voice dropped to what he probably thought was a whisper, but carried clearly in the quiet shop. "Dude's actually gonna sit there. For what, a senior discount?" Ed snorted, shook his head, returned to his phone. Jacob picked up his energy drink, took a long pull, eyes still on the old man by the window. Tim felt his stomach tighten with something he couldn't quite name. Not fear, not anger, just a creeping sense that something was off about this whole situation. The clock ticked forward. 4:56, 4:58, 5 o'clock. Rick sat motionless except for the slight rise and fall of his breathing. His eyes tracked a pickup truck rolling past outside, followed it until it moved out of sight, then returned to scanning the empty street. The afternoon light shifted another degree, shadows lengthening the quality of illumination, changing from gold to amber. Stephen Scott set down the scope he'd been examining and moved closer to where Rick sat, positioning himself near the ammunition display with a clear line of sight. He didn't say anything, didn't make it obvious, just adjusted his location and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Jacob tried again, voice raised enough to carry the distance. "Hey, old-timer, Brian might not be back till Monday. You want to leave a number or something?" Rick didn't turn his head. His response came directed at the window, not at Jacob, as though the question had been asked by someone standing outside. "I'll wait." The same 2 words, the same flat delivery. No elaboration, no explanation, no acknowledgement that this might be unusual or inconvenient or strange. Ed shifted his weight, uncomfortable now, in a way he couldn't articulate. Something about the perfect stillness of the man in the chair, the way he sat, with military precision, back straight, head level, hands positioned exactly parallel on his thighs. Most people waiting fidgeted, checked their phones, made conversation, did something to fill the dead air. This man did nothing. At 5:12, the sound of a diesel engine rattled through the front window, accompanied by the crunch of gravel under heavy tires. Brian Thompson's F250 swung into the parking space directly in front of the shop, the truck's blue paint, dulled by road dust toolbox, visible in the bed, alongside a stack of cardboard boxes secured with bungee cords. The engine cut. The door opened and Brian emerged, carrying a medium-sized cardboard box under one arm. At 46, he maintained the build of someone who'd stayed active after leaving the service, not bulky but solid through the chest and shoulders, with the kind of forearm definition that came from actual work rather than gym equipment. His hair cut high and tight in a style he'd never bothered to change after his discharge showed gray threading through the brown. He wore his standard uniform, navy polo shirt with Thompson firearms embroidered over the left chest, khaki Carhartt pants, work boots that had been resoled twice. He pushed through the door with his shoulder already forming the words he wanted to say to Ed about logging the Browning sale from earlier that week, the box balanced against his hip. The door swung shut behind him. The bell chimed. His eyes swept the interior of his shop in the automatic scan he performed every time he entered, checking the register, the display cases, the customers, the employees. His gaze snagged on the figure sitting in the chair by the window. The box slipped from his grip. It hit the floor with a solid thump, the sound of federal ammunition boxes shifting inside the cardboard compressing slightly on impact. Several loose boxes of .308 Winchester rolled out across the pine boards, coming to rest against the baseboard beneath the window display. Brian stood frozen 3 feet inside his own door, every muscle locked face, draining of color, so fast it looked like someone had opened a valve. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. His right hand, released from the box, hovered in midair, as though he'd forgotten how arms worked. Ed started to speak some joke, already forming about the boss getting old, but the words died when he saw Brian's expression. Jacob's straightened energy drink forgotten. Tim's hands stopped on the keyboard, fingers suspended above the keys. Rick rose from the chair with the same measured control he'd displayed since entering. Not fast, not dramatic, just the natural movement of someone who'd been sitting and now stood. He didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't offer any greeting. He simply looked at Brian across 25 feet of shop floor and waited. Brian's throat worked, swallowing once, twice. His hand came down, fingers curling into a fist, then releasing. Color returned to his face in a rush, red flooding his cheeks. When he finally found his voice, it came out cracked barely above a whisper, shaped by words he hadn't spoken in years, but hadn't forgotten. Sergeant Major Miller, sir. The title hung in the air like a physical object, something that could be touched and weighed and measured. Ed's head snapped toward Rick, reassessing everything. Jacob's mouth fell open. Tim pushed back from the computer chair wheels, squeaking against the floor. Stephen Scott, still standing near the ammunition display, came to attention so smoothly it looked choreographed, shoulders back, chin-up hands flat against his thighs. His own voice, quiet but clear, added weight to the moment. Sir. Brian crossed the distance between door and old soldier, In 6 strides, boots landing heavy on the floorboards. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough to shake hands, but far enough to maintain the boundary of respect. His right hand started to rise toward his temple, the beginning of a salute, then caught himself. Civilian world, civilian rules. He extended his hand instead. Rick took it, the handshake firm, but brief, neither man gripping harder than necessary. Brian's hand trembled slightly. Rick's didn't. Sir, I didn't know you were coming to town. Susan called, but I was on the road. I didn't know. I should have been here. Rick's voice, when he finally spoke, carried the same neutral tone he'd used with everyone else, but underneath it ran a current of warmth that hadn't been present before. Brian, good to see you. Been a while. He glanced around the shop, taking in the inventory, the organization, the care evident in how everything had been arranged and maintained. Heard you've done well with this place. Congratulations. Brian's throat tightened. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that would convey what it meant to have this man walk through his door, but the words tangled in his chest and came out as simple acknowledgement. Thank you, sir. His attention shifted to the note, still sitting on the counter, to Ed, standing there with his phone in his hand, looking lost to the reality of what had just happened. The realization hit him like cold water. He turned slowly toward Ed, and his voice changed, still controlled, still professional, but carrying an edge of frost that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. Ed did. Susan Miller call. Ed nodded, eager to prove he'd done his job. Yeah, boss, I wrote it down. Said Rick Miller was coming by at 5 for a pickup. Brian stared at the younger man for 3 seconds that stretched into uncomfortable silence. And you didn't tell me. The question landed softly, but carried weight. Ed's face flushed. I wrote it down right there. I figured you'd see it when you got back. Brian closed his eyes, breathed in through his nose, out through his mouth. When he opened them again, his attention moved to include Jacob and Ed, both, though Tim seemed to shrink slightly under the peripheral sweep of that gaze. His next question emerged quiet, almost conversational, which somehow made it worse. Gentlemen, do you have any idea who you've been talking to? Jacob rallied first defensive, trying to make this somehow not his fault. Boss, he said he was looking for a handgun. He looked like a farmer. We didn't know he was. Brian cut him off with a raised hand, the gesture sharp enough to stop words mid-sentence. He is a farmer. Now. The pause stretched long enough to hurt. Before that, he was the man who brought 50 soldiers home alive when every piece of intel, every tactical analysis, every senior officer said they were dead. The words landed like grenades, each one detonating in sequence. Ed's face went white. Jacob's hand, still holding the energy drink can, began to shake slightly. Tim looked like he might be sick. Brian took a step closer to them, his voice dropping even lower, forcing them to strain to hear. You know what you boys just did? You just mocked a Silver Star recipient to his face. You dismissed a man who saved my life, and 49 others because he was wearing work boots and a John Deere cap. Jacob found his voice, though it came out smaller than before. Boss, we didn't know. He didn't say anything about Brian's control cracked slightly, voice rising for the first time. He shouldn't have to say anything. That's the point. You see a man walk into this shop, you don't ask his name, don't ask his story, don't bother to show basic human respect. You just decide what he is based on, what he's wearing, and how old he looks. He pointed at the sign behind the counter, the one he'd carved himself, the rules he'd made clear from day one. Every customer gets respect. Remember that. Remember me telling you that on your first day, remember me making you repeat it back to me?" All three young men nodded, miserable caught. Brian turned back to Rick, who'd remained standing near the chair, hands at his sides, expression unchanged throughout the entire exchange. "Sir, please? Sit down. Let me handle this." Rick's response came measured, carrying the weight of someone who'd had this conversation before, in different circumstances, with different people. "Brian, it's fine." They didn't know. The grace in those words somehow made it worse. Brian shook his head. "That's exactly the problem, sir. They didn't know because they didn't bother to ask. They didn't know because they assumed. And assumption is the enemy of understanding." He walked to the front door, flipped the open sign to closed, twisted the lock. The sound of the deadbolt clicking home echoed in the quiet shop. Ed found enough voice to protest. "Boss, we don't close till 6. It's only." Brian turned, and whatever Ed saw in his face killed the rest of that sentence. "We close when I say we close. And right now, you three need an education more than we need to sell ammunition." He crossed to the counter, leaned against it, arms folded across his chest. His attention remained fixed on Ed, Jacob, and Tim, who stood in varying states of discomfort behind their positions. "You boys want to know where I learned to run this business? Want to know why I have rules about respect?" None of them answered. The question hadn't really required one. "Staff Sergeant, 10th Mountain Division, Afghanistan, 2011. He let that sit for a moment, watching recognition dawn on their faces. Ed knew Brian had been Army. They all did. But he'd never talked about it in detail, never shared stories, never made it part of his identity in the civilian world. "I was 33 years old, fresh off a promotion I didn't deserve, cocky as hell, thought I had everything figured out. Played football in high school, just like you, Jacob. Thought that made me tough. Thought rank made me smart." His voice carried the particular timbre of someone reliving something they'd rather forget but couldn't afford to. "Went to Afghanistan thinking I knew what I was doing. And then I met Sergeant Major Miller." Rick remained standing near the window, backlit by the late afternoon sun, silent as a photograph. Stephen Scott had relaxed from attention, but kept his position near the display, listening with the focus of someone who understood the shape of what was being described, even if he didn't know the specific details. Brian pushed off from the counter, began pacing a slow line between the register and the door boots, striking the floorboards in rhythm with his words. August 14th, 2011, Helmand Province, Route Blue Diamond. 16 vehicles, 50 men hauling medical supplies and ammunition to Forward Operating Base Sangin through some of the worst terrain Afghanistan had to offer. He stopped, turned to face them directly. At 14:47 local time, our lead MRAP hit an improvised explosive device, pressure plate buried in the road, 20 pounds of homemade explosive. Front axle destroyed vehicle, crippled, 3 men wounded. Tim made a small sound in the back of his throat. Ed had gone very still. "That wasn't the problem," Brian continued. "That was just the opening move. The real trap came 15 minutes later when they dropped half a mountain on us." He demonstrated with his hands, showing the geography, the placement, the kill box they'd been herded into. Controlled demolition. They'd placed charges in the rock face behind our convoy, probably spent days setting it up, just waiting for someone to trigger the IED. 200 tons of granite and limestone came down, blocked the only exit. Convoy trapped in a kill zone 200 meters long, 30 meters wide, sheer cliffs on both sides, enemy fighters on the ridgeline above us. His voice had gone quiet again, memory pulling him back to heat and dust and the smell of burning rubber. 118 degrees Fahrenheit. Radio couldn't reach air support. Satellite phone had no signal. IED crater too wide to drive around. Ridge too steep to climb. Water running low. Enemy up high, just waiting. The shop had gone completely silent except for Brian's voice and the faint tick of the clock above the register. Ed's phone lay forgotten on the counter. Jacob had set down his energy drink. Tim's hands gripped the edge of the desk hard enough to turn knuckles white. Our CO tried everything Brian said. Captain Michael Johnson Goodman, smart, trained at all the right schools. He tried to organize a reverse convoy, tried to call for extraction, tried to winch vehicles up the western ridge, and nothing worked. Every plan failed, every option closed. He looked at Rick, then really looked at him, and something in his expression shifted from the anger directed at his employees to something else, gratitude mixed with awe, mixed with the particular vulnerability of someone acknowledging a debt they could never fully repay. And then Sergeant Major Miller got out of his vehicle, walked the entire length of that convoy, 200 meters, completely exposed, while enemy fighters watched from above and told the captain he needed 20 minutes to find us a way out. The words settled into the space between them like sediment in water, visible and substantial and impossible to ignore. Ed's mouth opened slightly. Jacob had gone pale. Tim looked like he was trying to solve a math problem that didn't have numbers. Brian crossed his arms again, the motion defensive protective, as though holding something together that threatened to come apart. 20 minutes, while we were trapped in a kill box, with the temperature climbing, water running out, and enemy forces positioning for an ambush. He wanted 20 minutes to look at dirt. A sound escaped from Ed's throat. Something between a laugh and a cough, immediately stifled when Brian's attention snapped to him. "You think that's funny? You think an old farmer asking for 20 minutes to examine terrain is amusing?" Ed shook his head frantically, face burning. Brian's voice hardened to something close to anger. "I thought the same thing you're thinking." I watched him climb on top of an MRAP, scan the ridgeline, with binoculars climb down, walk 40 meters into scrub brush, kneel in the dirt and rub it between his fingers. "And I thought this old guy is going to get us all killed." He paused, let the confession hang there. I looked at him, 50 years old, sun-weathered, moving like he had all the time in the world, while 50 men sat in vehicles that were about to become coffins, and I thought he was a has-been, washed up, past his prime. The silence that followed carried weight. Brian walked to the window, stood beside Rick, looked out at the same empty street the older man had been watching. "I was wrong, dead wrong, and if you boys learn nothing else today, learn this: the most dangerous thing you can do is assume you know someone's value based on how they look." He turned back to face them, and when he spoke again, his voice had shifted into something that sounded like exhaustion mixed with wonder. "You want to know what happened next? You want to know why I locked this door 20 minutes early to make sure you understand this lesson?" None of them moved. Brian took their silence as assent. "Sit down, because this is going to take a while, and you're going to listen to every word." Ed, Jacob, and Tim found chairs, stools, positions that allowed them to see Brian without having to look directly at Rick. Stephen Scott remained where he was standing, at ease, bearing witness. Brian pulled a stool over from behind the counter, positioned it where he could see everyone, and prepared to tell the story he'd carried for 13 years. Those 3 young men thought they were mocking a farmer, but they'd just insulted the man who rewrote the book on impossible rescues, and what Brian was about to tell them would haunt them forever. Brian settled onto the stool, elbows on knees, hands clasped between them. The posture made him look younger, somehow less like the shop owner who'd spent the past 6 years building a business, and more like the soldier who'd climbed out of that convoy 13 years ago, with his hands still shaking from adrenaline. His voice, when it came, carried a different quality than before, not the anger directed at his employees, not the professional courtesy he used with customers, but something raw and unprocessed, like testimony given under oath. Helmand Province, Route Blue Diamond, 23 kilometers west of Forward Operating Base Delhi, 15 kilometers southeast of Sangin. The geography matters because everything that happened next came down to terrain. He looked at Rick, seeking some kind of permission or confirmation, but the older man's expression remained neutral, offering neither. 14th of August 2011. We were running convoy support for a medical resupply mission. 16 vehicles total, 8 MRA, mine, resistant ambush protected. For those who don't know, 4 Humvees, 4 M1078 supply trucks, 50 personnel, 3 officers, 12 NCOs, 35 enlisted. Ed shifted in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. Jacob had pulled out his phone but held it dark in his lap, forgotten. Tim leaned forward, entirely focused. Our CO was Captain Michael Johnson, good officer West Point, smart enough to know what he didn't know, but young enough to think that mattered. Executive officer was Lieutenant Robert Brown, prior enlisted solid. And our senior NCO, Brian, gestured toward Rick without looking at him directly. Was Sergeant Major Richard Miller, who at that point had already done 2 tours in Iraq and was on his 3rd deployment overall. 21 years in service. More combat experience than the rest of the command element combined. The numbers came out clipped, precise, the kind of detail that gets burned into memory when lives depend on accuracy. We rolled out from Delhi at 1300 hours. Temperature already 112 Fahrenheit, humidity 12%. Visibility degraded by heat, shimmer, and dust. Standard convoy formation, MRAP lead. Humvees at intervals. Supply trucks in the middle, MRAP rear. Sergeant Major Miller rode in Vehicle 5, middle of the pack, where he could see everything. Brian's hands tightened, knuckles whitening. 14:47 local time. Lead, MRAP, hits a pressure plate, IED buried in the roadbed. 20 pounds of homemade explosive, probably fertilizer-based, command detonated, or maybe triggered by weight, we never found out which. The blast takes out the front axle, tips the vehicle 35 degrees onto its side. 3 crew inside. He counted them off on his fingers. Staff Sergeant James Williams, driving broken collarbone and concussion. Specialist Ryan Lewis on the gun, moderate concussion, perforated eardrum from the overpressure. PFC Thomas Moore, riding passenger, shrapnel wounds to both legs, bleeding heavy, but not arterial. Tim made a sound low in his throat, quickly suppressed. Ed had gone completely still. Our medic, Corporal Daniel Allen, gets to them within 8 minutes. Good soldier, 24 years old, wanted to be a doctor after his enlistment. He stabilizes Moore's splints. Williams' shoulder clears Lewis for duty. professional, efficient, by the book. Brian paused, letting them absorb the information, then continued in that same flat recitation. That was 1455. The IED wasn't the trap. It was the bait. The trap came 7 minutes later. He stood unable to sit still for what came next, began pacing in a tight line between the stool and the counter. 1502, series of explosions from the ridgeline behind us. Not random rockfall. Controlled demolition. Enemy forces had placed charges in natural fault lines in the cliff face, probably over several days, just waiting for someone to drive into their kill zone. 200 tons minimum of granite, limestone, and sandstone came down. Debris field 40 feet high, 60 feet wide, completely blocking the route behind us. His hands moved through the air, sketching the geography, building the trap in 3 dimensions. Front exit blocked by disabled MRA, P&I, ED crater 12 feet across, 8 feet deep. Rear exit buried under a mountain. Convoy trapped in a box 200 meters long, 30 meters wide, with sheer cliffs rising 60 feet on both sides. Perfect ambush position, perfect kill zone, and we had just driven straight into it. Jacob's phone slipped from his lap, clattered on the floor. He didn't reach for it. Brian's pacing accelerated, boots striking the floorboards in rhythm with his words. Inside those vehicles, temperature climbs to 135 Fahrenheit within 15 minutes. We're carrying 4 liters of water per person, but at that temperature, you need 1 liter per hour just to avoid heat exhaustion. Simple math says we've got maybe 4 hours before heat becomes a bigger problem than the enemy. He stopped, turned to face them directly. Captain Johnson tries everything. Radio for air support. No signal, valley walls block transmission. Satellite phone network unavailable. Same problem. He organizes an attempt to reverse the convoy drive back over the rock slide. Scouts report it's impossible. Debris, 2 unstable vehicles would roll. He tries to winch Humvees up the western ridge. Slope measures 60+ degrees loose. Shale first cable snaps after 15 feet, and the vehicle slides back down. The litany of failures came out mechanical, each one another door closing. By 1530, soldiers are starting to break. Private John Hill from Kansas, 19 years old, begins hyperventilating, can't get his breathing under control. Sergeant George White starts snapping at everyone, stress reaction, losing his composure. Lieutenant Brown is on the radio, repeating the same distress call every 2 minutes, even though nobody's answering. And inside those MRAPs, men are cooking. Ed's face had lost all color. Tim gripped the edge of the desk hard enough that his fingernails left marks in the wood. Brian walked to where Rick stood and stopped 3 feet away, close enough to make it personal, far enough to maintain the space that respect required. At 1545, Sergeant Major Miller gets out of his vehicle, doesn't ask permission, doesn't wait for orders, just opens the door and steps out into 118-degree heat with enemy fighters watching from the ridgeline above us. The shop had gone so quiet that the tick of the clock sounded loud as a metronome. He walks the entire convoy, front to back, 200 meters, exposed, no cover, no hurry, like he's inspecting equipment on a training exercise back at Fort Drum. Every step measured, every movement deliberate. And the enemy doesn't shoot, because shooting one man gives away firing positions. They want all of us. They want to watch us die slow. Rick's expression hadn't changed throughout Brian's recitation. He stood with the same military bearing he'd displayed since entering, hands loose at his sides, weight balanced evenly, eyes focused, somewhere in the middle distance, as though watching a film only he could see. Brian's voice dropped lower, forcing his audience to lean in to hear. I watched him walk that line, and I thought he'd lost his mind. This was the senior NCO, the man with more combat experience than anyone else in the convoy, and he was strolling through a kill zone like he had all the time in the world. I thought this old guy's going to get himself killed, and probably draw fire that gets the rest of us killed too. He turned back to Ed, Jacob, and Tim, making sure they understood the parallel. I looked at him the same way you three looked at him 20 minutes ago. I saw his age, his weathered face, his slow movements, and I decided I knew what he was worth. I was wrong then. You were wrong today. That's the lesson. Jacob found his voice barely above a whisper. What did he do? Brian almost smiled. He climbed on top of MRA P number 5, highest vantage point available, and spent 8 minutes scanning the northern ridgeline with binoculars. Didn't say a word, just looked. Then he climbed down, walked 40 meters into the scrub brush, knelt in the dirt, and picked up a handful of soil. The details sounded absurd, delivered in the context of imminent death and enemy contact. Ed's expression showed he thought so too. He rubbed the dirt between his fingers for maybe 30 seconds, examined the color, the texture, the composition. Then he studied the rock formations, the way weathering had shaped the cliff face, the patterns of erosion. After that, he came back to Captain Johnson and said 5 words. Brian held up 5 fingers, counted them off. Sir, I need 20 minutes. Tim inhaled sharply. Jacob shook his head as though trying to dislodge the image. Captain asks what he needs 20 minutes for, and the sergeant major says to find us a way out. Johnson looks at him like he's lost his mind, which is fair. It's because every tactical assessment, every piece of intelligence, every map we have says there's exactly one way through this valley, and we're trapped in it. Brian crossed to the counter, leaned against it, arms folded. Johnson gives him the 20 minutes because what else is he going to do? And the sergeant major starts explaining. There's a dry riverbed 180 meters northeast. Intel says it doesn't exist. Maps don't show it. Nobody in command believes him. Stephen Scott spoke for the first time since Brian had started talking, his voice carrying the particular authority of someone who'd seen similar terrain under similar circumstances. How did he know Rick answered? The first words he'd spoken since sitting down to wait nearly 40 minutes ago. You can see where water used to flow if you know what to look for. Gray rock transitions to red-brown sediment. That's silt deposit. Water carved the channel over decades, left markers. Tamarisk shrubs only grow where groundwater used to sit within 15 feet of the surface. The geology tells the story if you speak the language. His voice carried the same neutral tone as before, but underneath it ran something else. Not pride, not defensiveness, just the calm certainty of someone stating observable fact. Brian picked up the thread. The sergeant major grew up on 640 acres in eastern Nebraska. Corn, soybeans, wheat. Spent 30 years working land before he ever put on a uniform. Learned to read terrain the way most people learn to read books. Water flow, erosion patterns, soil, composition, drainage. He could look at ground and tell you its history going back 50 years. Ed's expression showed he was beginning to understand connections forming behind his eyes. So, the Army taught him how to apply civilian knowledge in combat situations, Brian continued, how to use farming experience for tactical terrain analysis, how to turn 30 years of looking at dirt into the difference between 50 men living or dying. He pushed off from the counter. Captain Johnson doesn't want to believe it. Maps are made by satellites and drones and trained cartographers. They show rock impenetrable terrain, no passage. But Sergeant Major Miller is looking at the same ground and seeing history, seeing what used to be there. And he tells the captain, "Sir, you can trust the map and die here, or trust me and maybe live. Your call." The weight of that choice hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Johnson gives the order. The sergeant major takes command of the extraction. Not officially, captain's still in charge, but everyone knows who's running this operation now. Brian counted off on his fingers again, each point a component of the plan. Step 1. Clear the approach to the riverbed. 20 men with entrenching tools, axes, pry bars. Remove rocks bigger than a basketball. 30 minutes maximum effort. Step 2. Redistribute weight. All ammunition and medical supplies from the disabled MRAP get spread across functional vehicles. Lighten the load, improve mobility. Step 3. Rig winch cables between vehicles 2, 4, and 7. Mutual support, pull each other through the hard sections. Step 4. Move vehicles one at a time. Smallest first Humvees, then MRAPs, then supply trucks. Step 5. Rear guard maintains defensive position, suppressive fire only if engaged. Step 6. Estimate 2.5 to 3 hours for complete extraction. Tim spoke, his voice uncertain. Did it work? Brian looked at him for a long moment. I'm standing here. That's your answer. He resumed pacing, but slower now, the urgency replaced by something closer to exhaustion. 1,600 hours. We start clearing the approach. I'm one of the 20 men pulling rocks, and I can tell you that working in 118-degree heat while wearing body armor and carrying 40 pounds of equipment is about as close to hell as you can get while still being alive. Hands bleeding, sweat pouring, vision blurring. But the sergeant major keeps walking. The line keeps saying the same thing, steady. Don't rush. Solid footing. His voice took on a different quality, something approaching reverence. And under all that debris, under 30 years of accumulated dirt and brush and desert vegetation, we find it. An old goat path, evidence of water flow from decades past. The riverbed exists exactly where he said it would be. Jacob made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. 16:35. First vehicle enters the riverbed. Humvee number 3, driven by Specialist Jeffrey Davis. The sergeant major gives him specific instructions. Walking speed 8 miles per hour maximum. Don't spin the tires. Davis hits a steep section 22-degree incline. Tires start slipping on loose rock. He's about to gun it, try to power through, but the sergeant major stops him, orders him to back up 3 feet, angle the approach 15 degrees left, then proceed. Davis follows instructions, makes it through. Brian stopped pacing, stood very still. 1650, MRAP, number 2, gets stuck at a 45-degree turn. Vehicle's too wide, gap between boulders too narrow. Wheels spinning, going nowhere. We think it's over. Convoy's blocked plans failed. The sergeant major walks around the vehicle, kneels, looks under the chassis. Then he tells the driver to deflate the left side tires by 20 psi. Lower the vehicle 4 inches, create clearance. We do it. MRAP squeezes through with 2 inches to spare. Ed whispered something that sounded like disbelief. 17:15. Brian's voice went flat again, the emotion draining out as he approached the worst part. We're moving vehicle number 7 when we hear it. A K-47 fire from the East Ridge Line. Enemy's been watching the whole time, finally figured out we're escaping. Rounds start hitting dirt 10 feet from the convoy. 2 men go down. PFC Thomas Moore, already wounded from the IED, takes a round through the shoulder. Corporal Daniel Allen, our medic, gets hit in the leg while treating someone else, his hands clenched into fists. Captain Johnson's instinct is to stop everything, return fire, suppress the enemy position. It's the right tactical response for a static defense. But we're not static. We're mobile, and stopping means dying. Rick spoke again, his voice cutting through Brian's narrative. The math was simple. Stop moving, enemy reinforcements arrive, we die in place. Keep moving, take casualties, but reach safety. No good options, just less bad ones. Brian nodded. Sergeant Major Miller countermands the captain's order, tells him rear guard only controlled bursts, keep the vehicles moving. And here's the part that still gives me nightmares. He's standing in the open, directing traffic with hand signals, bullets kicking up dust 5 feet away. And he doesn't flinch, doesn't take cover, doesn't rush, just keeps guiding vehicles through the riverbed like he's directing cars in a parking lot. Tim's voice came out strangled. How did he not get hit? Sometimes luck matters more than skill, but mostly he was doing exactly what needed to be done and trusting that was enough. The answer came from Stephen Scott, not Brian, and it carried the weight of personal experience. Brian continued, voice gaining strength. I was on rear guard. I watched him walk over to Private Hill, the kid from Kansas who'd been hyperventilating earlier, and put a hand on his shoulder. Hill's shaking so bad he can't hold his rifle steady, and the sergeant major tells him, "Sun breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth. You're not dying today." The words landed like a benediction. Ed closed his eyes. Jacob stared at the floor. Hill steadied, held his position, did his job because someone told him he was going to be okay, and he believed it. Brian walked to the window, looked out at the street where the sun had dropped below the buildings, casting everything in shadow. 1745. Last vehicle approaching the hardest section. MRAP number 8, carrying all 5 wounded. Heaviest load, steepest grade, narrowest passage. Sergeant George White's driving, and he tells the sergeant major he doesn't think they can make the angle. The vehicle's going to tip, or the wheels are going to lose traction, or something's going to fail. He turned back to face the room. You know what the sergeant major tells him? You can, but you need momentum. Back up 20 feet. Second gear. Don't touch the brake until you crest. White looks at him like he's insane, but he does it, and the MRAP makes it through. Brian's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. We found out later, years later actually, that there was a second path. Easier grade, wider clearance, safer approach. Would have added 30 minutes to the extraction. Ed frowned, not understanding. Brian spelled it out. The sergeant major knew about it. Walked that section earlier while we were clearing the approach. He chose the harder path because enemy reinforcements were coming, and 30 minutes would have put us back in contact. He gambled 50 lives on saving 30 minutes. The silence that followed carried its own weight. Jacob looked at Rick with something approaching awe. Tim's hands had gone white-knuckled on the desk edge. 1802. Final vehicle clears the kill zone. Total time trapped 3 hours and 15 minutes. Final casualty count 0, killed in action, 5 wounded, all survived. Ammunition expended less than 200 rounds, all suppressive fire. Water remaining 30% of initial supply. Brian's voice strengthened, taking on the cadence of official record. When we stopped 2 kilometers away and called for medevac, Captain Johnson walked over to where Sergeant Major Miller was sitting on the ground with his back against a tire. First time all afternoon, the Sergeant Major had sat down, and his hands were shaking just slightly, just enough to see if you were looking for it. Adrenaline finally wearing off. Rick's expression flickered, something crossing his face too quickly to name. Johnson said, "Sergeant Major, you just saved 50 lives." And the Sergeant Major said, "Just did my job, sir." Ed made a sound in the back of his throat. Brian held up a hand, forestalling whatever comment was forming. 6 months later, Sergeant Major Richard Miller received the Silver Star. Citation reads, "For gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States." Specific details classified, but the award summary mentions tactical terrain analysis under fire, unconventional route assessment, and preservation of force effectiveness in hostile territory. Jacob's voice came out rough. "What did he do with it?" Brian looked at Rick, eyebrows raised in question. Rick's response came in that same flat tone he'd used for everything else. "Drawer somewhere." The casual dismissal of one of the military's highest honors hit harder than any dramatic statement could have. Brian turned back to his employees. He doesn't even display it, never mentioned it, never used it for anything, never brought it up in conversation. Because for him, it wasn't about recognition, it was about getting the job done. The shop descended into silence again, this time carrying a different quality, not the uncomfortable quiet of people avoiding confrontation, but the heavy stillness of information being processed and integrated and fundamentally changing how someone sees the world. Stephen Scott moved from his position near the ammunition display, crossing the floor until he stood at a respectful distance from Rick. When he spoke, his voice carried the formality of someone delivering a report. "Sergeant Major Miller, Stephen Scott, former Army Ranger, served 1988 to 95, Gulf War." Rick acknowledged him with a slight nod. "I heard about that extraction. They taught it at Fort Benning in 2014 as part of the Ranger course. Called it the Miller Assessment, using agricultural knowledge for tactical terrain analysis under unconventional circumstances." Rick's eyebrows rose fractionally, the first sign of genuine surprise he'd shown. "They did. It's in the Ranger Handbook now. Chapter on unconventional problem solving. Required reading for anyone going through the program." The information settled over the room like dust after an explosion. Ed stared at Rick with the expression of someone watching their entire worldview recalibrate. Tim looked like he might be sick. Jacob sat motionless, processing. Rick shook his head, the gesture small but definitive. "That's excessive. It wasn't a tactical innovation. I looked at dirt and saw what used to be there. Any farmer could have done the same thing." Brian's response came sharp, almost angry. "Sir, with all due respect, 20 other NCOs looked at that same dirt. Officers enlisted people with training and experience and field time. None of them saw a path because they weren't farmers. They were soldiers. I just happened to be both." Rick's voice carried no defensiveness, no false modesty, just the calm statement of someone explaining a simple equation. "Spent more time on a tractor than in a Humvee before I enlisted. 30 years reading land, learning drainage patterns, understanding how water shapes terrain over decades. By the time I got to Afghanistan, I'd been studying geology without knowing that's what it was called." Ed stood abruptly, the chair scraping back across the floor. He crossed halfway to where Rick stood, then stopped as though hitting an invisible barrier. "Mr. Miller, I don't know what to say." His voice came out cracked raw, stripped of the casual confidence he'd worn like armor since the moment Rick had walked through the door. "I judged you the second you came in. Based on your boots, your truck, your age, I'm studying marketing, and they teach us to assess people quickly, build customer profiles, identify buying patterns." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I realize now that's not reading people, that's profiling. That's making assumptions based on surface details, and it's wrong." Rick regarded him for a long moment, expression unchanged. "You're young. You'll learn." The grace in those 3 words somehow made Ed's shame more visible. He nodded, unable to articulate anything further, and returned to his chair. Tim spoke next, his voice quiet but steady. "Mr. Miller, my grandfather served in the Gulf War, 1st Armored Division. He came home and never talked about it, not once. People at the VFW would ask him about combat, and he'd just say, 'I did my job.'" Rick's attention shifted to Tim waiting. "That's exactly what you said to Captain Johnson. And watching Brian tell this story, I finally understand why my grandfather doesn't talk. It's not because he's ashamed or traumatized or trying to forget. It's because for him it wasn't about being a hero. It was about doing what needed to be done." Rick nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Your grandfather's name, George Clark. Tell him Richard Miller says thank you for his service." Tim's eyes widened. "You'd do that? He's a brother. We take care of our own." In that moment, those 3 young men learned what their college classes and jobs could never teach them, that real strength doesn't announce itself. It shows up, does the work, and goes home without needing applause. The bell above the door rang, despite the closed sign and the locked deadbolt. Brian's head snapped toward the sound, confused, then relaxed, when he recognized the figure in the doorway. He must have unlocked it at some point without realizing muscle memory overriding intention. Mark Anderson stepped through, moving with the careful precision of someone whose body had betrayed him just enough times to demand respect. At 68, he maintained the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in positions of authority, shoulders back despite the slight stoop age had imposed, head-level eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. The tweed vest and slacks looked out of place in a gun shop, but he wore them with the confidence of someone who'd long since stopped caring about fitting in. He leaned on a wooden cane, not heavily, but enough to suggest it served function rather than fashion. The hand gripping it showed liver spots and prominent veins, but the fingers remained steady. Brian straightened, surprise evident. "Colonel Anderson." The older man waved off the title. "Mark Bryan. We're all civilians now." His attention moved across the shop, cataloging faces, landing on Rick with the particular focus of recognition mixed with something deeper. "Richard Miller. Well, I'll be damned." Rick stood the movement economical and crossed the distance with his hand extended. They shook with the formality of men who'd shared circumstances that demanded respect. "Colonel Anderson. Mark, please. The retirement papers say I don't get to wear the rank anymore." He turned to address Brian and the others, his voice carrying the particular timbre of someone accustomed to briefing rooms and formal presentations. "Brian Thompson, Staff Sergeant 10th Mountain, 2011. I read your after-action report from Helmand Province. Remarkable piece of writing. Clear, concise, no embellishment. Everything a combat AAR should be." Brian blinked, processing. "You read my report, sir. I read every significant action report from that deployment. Yours stood out because it documented something the manuals don't teach: how to survive when doctrine fails." He gestured toward Rick without looking at him directly. "But it wasn't your doing, was it? The plan, the execution, the terrain assessment. You documented it well, but this man made it happen." Ed, Jacob, and Tim watched this exchange with the expressions of people realizing they'd stumbled into something far larger than they'd understood. Mark's attention shifted to the three young employees, his voice taking on the pedagogical quality of someone delivering a lecture. "Did Brian tell you about the Silver Star?" Brian nodded. Mark continued as though he hadn't. "Did he mention the 2 Bronze Stars? The Purple Heart from Fallujah in 2004, the Combat Infantryman badge with 2 stars indicating 3 separate combat deployments." Silence answered him. He nodded, unsurprised. Richard Miller served 22 years. Iraq twice. Afghanistan once. Enlisted at 31, retired at 52 as a sergeant major. One of the finest non-commissioned officers I ever had the privilege of commanding. Jacob found his voice, though it came out smaller than usual. "You commanded him Fallujah, 2004. I was a major. He was my senior NCO." Mark set his cane against the counter with deliberate care, freeing both hands to illustrate what came next. "We took an RPG hit on our Humvee during a patrol. Driver killed instantly. Vehicle on fire. I was trapped under the passenger door, pinned from the waist down, smoke filling the cabin, ammunition starting to cook off from the heat." He pulled his collar aside, slightly revealing a scar that traced from collarbone toward throat. "That's where shrapnel would have severed my carotid if Sergeant Miller hadn't been covering my head while he pulled me out. Instead, it hit him in the left shoulder. 14 stitches, 2 weeks limited duty, back to full operations before the doctors cleared him." Mark's voice dropped lower, losing the lecturing tone and gaining something more personal. "He saved my life 20 years ago. Never mentioned it, never brought it up, never used it for leverage or recognition or anything else. I found out about the extent of his injuries 6 months later when I reviewed medical records for the unit." Rick's expression hadn't changed throughout Mark's recitation. He stood with the same military bearing hands at his sides, offering neither confirmation nor denial. Mark turned to face the 3 young men directly. "You need to understand something. Men like Richard Miller don't do what they do for medals or recognition or gratitude. They do it because when the moment comes, they're the only ones capable of staying calm while everyone else is falling apart. That's not training, that's character, and character can't be taught." The words landed with finality. Ed looked like he'd been physically struck. Tim had tears running down his face that he didn't bother wiping away. Jacob stared at the floor jaw, clenched tight enough to show muscle definition. Mark picked up his cane, leaned on it slightly. "Richard, how's Susan doing?" Rick's face softened fractionally, the first real change in expression since entering the shop. "She's good, dealing with my stubbornness and the chickens with equal patience." Mark chuckled, the sound genuine. "She always was the strong one in that relationship. Had to be married to you." A ghost of a smile touched Rick's mouth, there and gone. "That's true. You retired to the farm in 2013, bought 160 acres outside Haven Ridge. Small operation, corn and soybeans mostly. Keeps us busy enough." Mark nodded approvingly. "You earned it. 22 years of carrying other people's weight. Time to carry your own. The casual acknowledgement of service debt and release hung in the air for a moment before Mark turned his attention back to Brian. "I should let you get back to business. Just wanted to stop in, see the place. Heard good things about what you're doing here." Brian straightened unconsciously. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." Mark moved toward the door, then paused, hand on the frame, looking back at the three employees. "Every person who walks through that door has a story you don't know. Some stories matter more than others, but you won't know which ones unless you bother to ask." He left without waiting for response, the bell chiming his exit, the sound of his cane tapping against concrete, fading as he moved down the sidewalk outside. The silence that followed carried a different weight than before. Not shock, not shame. Shame, but something closer to understanding, settling into place like sediment after a storm. Jacob stood abruptly, the motion jerky, uncontrolled. He crossed the floor toward Rick, stopped 5 feet away as though hitting an invisible barrier. When he spoke, his voice shook. "Mr. Miller, sir, I need to say something." Rick waited, offering nothing. "I was a jerk, not just today, every day. I judge people by their trucks, their clothes, how old they are. My mom works at the VA hospital in Grand Island. She's a nurse, comes home every night telling me about the veterans she takes care of." His voice broke slightly. "PTSD, amputations, guys who can't sleep, can't work, can't function. And I still didn't learn. I still walk in here every day and look down on people based on how they dress." Tears started, and he didn't try to stop them. "I'm so sorry." Rick's expression shifted fractionally, something that might have been compassion or understanding or simply recognition. "Your mother's name?" Jacob froze. "Patricia Johnson? How did you know she was my son's nurse in 2009, before his last deployment?" The color drained from Jacob's face so fast he swayed slightly. "Your son," Rick's voice went quiet, the words coming slower. "David Miller, 27 years old, getting ready to deploy to Fallujah. Your mother spent 3 hours with him, going over his medical records, making sure everything was complete and accurate. Found an issue with his vaccination records, got it fixed before he shipped out." He paused, and something in his eyes went distant. "David died in 2010, IED. But that wasn't your mother's fault. She did everything right. Everything." Jacob's face crumpled. He covered it with both hands, shoulders shaking. Ed looked away, his own eyes red. Tim's hand covered his mouth, stifling sound. Rick crossed the distance between them and put a hand on Jacob's shoulder. The contact seemed to break something loose, and Jacob's sobs came harder. "Son, you didn't kill David? A bomb did. And you didn't know my story. Now you do." Rick's voice remained steady, carrying none of the grief that must have lived beneath those words. "Your mother's a good woman. She takes care of people who need it. Be the kind of man she raised you to be." Jacob nodded, unable to speak, tears still streaming. "Tell her Richard Miller says thank you. She'll remember." "I will, I promise." Rick stepped back, giving Jacob space to collect himself. The young man wiped his face with his palms, breathing in shuddering gasps, trying to regain control. Brian cleared his throat, the sound deliberate, pulling focus back to practical matters. "Sir, you came in here looking for a handgun. Let's find you something appropriate." He moved behind the counter, opened the display case, removed 3 pistols, and set them on the glass surface. Glock 19 Gen 5, Smith & Wesson M&P 9, M2.0 Compact, Sig Sauer P365, all 9mm, all reliable platforms. Rick approached the counter, his attention shifting from the emotional weight of the past few minutes to the technical assessment at hand. He picked up each weapon in sequence, the movements automatic practiced, revealing competence built over decades. Chamber check muscle memory, fingers moving without conscious thought. Trigger pull test, dry firing after visual confirmation of clear status. Grip assessment, palm placement, finger reach, natural point of aim. Sight picture evaluation, front and rear alignment visibility in current lighting. Weight distribution, balance point, carrying comfort, perceived recoil management. Ed watched the display with the expression of someone seeing expertise for the first time and recognizing the gulf between competence and mastery. Tim leaned forward, studying the technique, mentally cataloging each step. Rick set down the SIG, picked up the Smith & Wesson, again turned it over in his hands. For me, the Glock. I'm used to it. Carried variants for years. Know the platform, trust the reliability. He held up the M&P. For Susan, this one. Smaller hands, better ergonomics. Less felt recoil due to grip angle and bore axis. More natural point of aim for someone who hasn't shot regularly in a while. Ed stepped closer, drawn despite himself. Which one would you pick if you were starting fresh, sir? Rick considered the question with the same seriousness he'd given everything else. Depends what you're optimizing for. Reliability Glock, ergonomics Smith, concealment SIG. There's no universal answer, just informed choices based on specific circumstances. Brian pulled a box of defensive ammunition from beneath the counter. Federal HST 124 grain. Good expansion, reliable feeding. I'll throw in 2 extra magazines and a lockbox on the house. Rick started to protest, but Brian held up a hand. Sir, after what you did for us in Helmand, a $40 lockbox and some magazines is nothing. Please, let me do this. Rick studied Brian for a moment, then nodded. All right, thank you. Brian's phone sitting on the counter buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced at it reflexively, did a double-take read more carefully. His expression shifted through surprise, confusion, and something approaching awe. Sir, this is strange timing. He turned the phone to show Rick the screen. The message came from a contact labeled, Kevin, Dad, just finished small unit leadership class. Instructor used something called the Miller Assessment as an example. Standard operating procedure now for terrain analysis under fire. Guy who invented it was a sergeant major from Nebraska. Saved 50 soldiers in Afghanistan. Wish I could meet him someday. Rick read the message, and the smallest smile touched his mouth. Small world. Brian's voice came out thick. Sir, that's my son, Kevin. He's at Fort Bragg, 3rd year infantry, following in his old man's footsteps. You must be proud. Brian nodded, not trusting his voice, then added, quieter, I worry every single day, knowing he's going to deploy, knowing what's out there, what can happen. Rick's response came with the weight of personal experience. I know. I worried about David every deployment. Couldn't sleep when he was overseas. Called Susan every day just to hear someone tell me it would be okay. He paused. But Brian, you can't protect him from the world. You can only prepare him. And if he's anything like you, he'll be fine. Thank you, sir. That helps. Brian pulled out the ATF Form 4473, the federal background check paperwork required for all firearm purchases. Let's get this processed. Nebraska doesn't have a waiting period for handguns, but I need to run the NICS check. Should clear in about 20 minutes. Rick took the form, filled it out with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Each line completed in clear block letters: name, address, place of birth, physical description. When he reached the section about military service, his pen paused for just a fraction of a second over the question about dishonorable discharge before marking the appropriate box. The question about mental health or institutionalization received the same brief hesitation, not enough to be obvious, just a momentary stillness before the pen moved again. Brian fed the form into his computer fingers, moving across the keyboard with practiced speed. The NICS system would query FBI databases, check for disqualifying factors, return approval or denial within minutes in most cases. The clock above the register showed 6:18. Outside Main Street had emptied completely, shops closed, evening settling over Haven Ridge with the quiet that came naturally to small Nebraska towns. Jacob had composed himself, though his eyes remained red. Ed sat very still, phone forgotten. Tim watched Rick with the expression of someone trying to memorize every detail. Rick returned to the chair by the window, settling into it with the same patience he'd displayed earlier. He didn't ask about the wait time, didn't check his phone, didn't give any indication that 20 minutes mattered one way or another. He simply waited, hands resting on his thighs, eyes on the darkening street, present in the moment, without needing to fill it with anything more than existence. The computer hummed quietly, processing the background check through networks that connected Haven Ridge to databases in Clarksburg, West Virginia. Brian's fingers drummed against the counter, a nervous rhythm he didn't seem aware of making. 20 minutes stretched ahead like empty highway. Stephen Scott moved closer to where Rick sat, positioning himself with the unconscious precision of someone who'd spent years learning proper spacing and angles. He didn't make it obvious, didn't intrude, just adjusted his location until he occupied the same general area. Mr. Miller, if you don't mind me asking, what made you join at 31? That's older than most enlistees. Rick's attention shifted from the window, considering whether the question warranted the answer it required. My father had a stroke in '79. I was 18, just graduated high school. Had a football scholarship to University of Nebraska. Linebacker, nothing special but enough to get an education paid for. He paused, and something in his posture suggested this story didn't get told often. Farm was 640 acres. Corn, soybeans, some wheat. Can't run itself, especially not with my father paralyzed on the left side. My mother couldn't do it alone, so I stayed. Ed's attention locked on Rick with sudden focus, hearing something in this narrative that resonated with whatever narrative he'd built for himself. You gave up college for the farm. Wasn't really a choice. Was just what needed doing. Rick's voice carried no bitterness, no regret, just the flat statement of historical fact. Worked the farm for 12 years, learned everything about soil composition, drainage patterns, crop rotation, equipment, maintenance. My father died in '89. Cancer, not the stroke. My mother sold the place 6 months later, moved to Lincoln to be near her sister. I was 31, didn't have anything keeping me in civilian life anymore. Figured I'd serve a few years, save money, and buy my own land. Tim leaned forward, genuinely curious. What made you stay 22 years? Because I was good at it. The Army, I mean. And people depended on me. The simplicity of the answer somehow made it more profound. Rick's eyes returned to the window. Couldn't walk away when guys like Brian needed someone who knew how to stay calm when everything was falling apart. From behind the counter, Brian's voice came quiet. We did, sir, every single day. The bell above the door chimed, despite the closed sign still hanging in the window. A man pushed through, bringing with him the smell of motor oil and the particular stoop that came from years bent over engine blocks. Jonathan Wright, at 58, carried his occupation in his posture mechanic's hands, permanently stained despite scrubbing Carhartt jacket with the Haven Ridge Auto Service patch on the breast boots that had absorbed enough oil and grease to be considered hazardous waste. "Brian, you're closed early. I need to pick up that." He stopped mid-sentence, eyes landing on Rick. Recognition dawned slowly, disbelief followed by certainty. Rick Miller. Rick stood across the floor with that same measured pace, hand extended. They shook like old friends who'd lost touch and found each other again by accident. "Jonathan, been a while." Jonathan turned to address the room at large, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of someone who'd just won an argument nobody else knew they were having. "Rick and I went to high school together, Haven Ridge High Class of '79. Played football together. Rick was middle linebacker, best defensive player we had." Jacob's expression showed surprise, fighting with shame. "You played football long time ago." Jonathan ignored the deflection, warming to the topic. He was good. Had scholarship offers from Nebraska, Kansas State, Iowa State. Could have played Division I, maybe made something of it. He looked at Rick, and his tone shifted to something more serious. Then his dad got sick, and Rick stayed home to run the farm. Turned down every offer. Spent the next 12 years working land, while everyone else our age went off to college. Started careers, got married. The words landed with weight. Ed's face showed something approaching understanding, connections forming that hadn't been there before. Jonathan continued, his voice softer now. "I went to technical school, learned auto mechanics, came back to Haven Ridge to work. Used to stop by the farm sometimes. See how Rick was doing. He never complained, never talked about what he'd given up, just did the work." Rick's expression hadn't changed, but something in his stillness suggested this conversation touched on things he'd rather leave buried. "Jonathan, it was 35 years ago. Doesn't matter now. It matters because it shows who you are. Always has." Jonathan glanced around the shop, taking in the audience, then back to Rick. When Rick finally enlisted at 31, everyone thought he was crazy. Too old, they said. Should just find a job, settle down. But Rick knew what he needed to do. He paused for effect. 22 years later, he came back with more medals than anyone from our graduating class combined. Bought his own farm, married Susan, did it his way. Mark Anderson, still present, though he'd moved to a chair near the front, added his voice to the conversation. "The best soldiers are the ones who chose service for the right reasons. Not because they didn't have options, but because they understood the cost and decided it was worth paying." The words hung in the air, carrying authority that came from decades of evaluating men under circumstances that revealed character. Rick addressed the room generally, his tone suggesting he wanted to move past this particular topic. "I'm farming now. 160 acres outside town. Susan and I run it together, hire help during harvest. It's quiet, predictable, everything I wanted after leaving the service." Tim's question came carefully, as though he were testing whether this ground would hold weight. "Are you happy?" Rick looked at him directly, considering the question with the same seriousness he'd given everything else that afternoon. "Yeah, I am. Susan and I have coffee on the porch every morning. Watch the sunrise. Talk about what needs doing that day. Simple things. But after 22 years of war, simple is enough." After 22 years of war, Rick Miller found peace in the simplest things. Coffee, sunrise, land beneath his feet. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't winning, it's knowing when to come home. Jacob's voice emerged tentative, afraid of the answer, but needing to ask anyway. "Sir, do you ever regret it? Staying in so long, missing time with David?" The question landed like a physical blow. Rick's jaw tightened, the first visible sign of tension in the muscles of his face. He was silent for 10 seconds. That felt longer, weighing words that couldn't be taken back once spoken. Every day. The honesty in those 2 words cut deeper than any elaboration could have. Ed's breath caught audibly. Tim looked away. Jacob's face crumpled. "I missed David's high school graduation, was deployed to Iraq, missed his 21st birthday, missed years I can't get back, and wouldn't trade for any medal or commendation or achievement the Army could give me." Rick's voice remained steady, despite the content, each word delivered with the same flat precision. "But I don't regret serving. I regret not finding balance, not figuring out how to be both a soldier and a father at the same time." He looked at Brian. "You got kids too. Kevin at Bragg 23 Infantry, Ashley's 19 Nursing School at University of Nebraska Medical Center. Don't miss their lives while you're living yours." Brian's face showed he'd taken the words as more than advice, as something closer to commandment. His voice came out rough. "Sir Kevin deploys to Poland next spring. NATO rotation. I'm terrified. You should be. Fear means you love him, but don't let fear stop you from being proud of what he's doing." Rick's tone shifted slightly, taking on the quality of someone speaking from hard-won experience. "And don't let him see your fear. He needs to know you believe in him, that you trust his training, his judgment, his ability to come home safe. Because doubt is contagious, and he's going to have enough of his own without carrying yours too." Brian nodded, unable to speak, eyes wet. The computer chimed, pulling Brian's attention back to the screen. He read the results, clicked through confirmation screens, printed the approval form. "We're clear. Background check approved." He retrieved the Smith & Wesson from the back room where he'd stored it after the initial examination, setting it on the counter alongside 2 additional 15-round magazines, a box of federal HST defensive ammunition, and a stack-on portable safe with a cable lock. The total came to $587.42. Rick pulled out a worn leather wallet, extracted 6 $100 bills, placed them on the counter. Brian made change $12.58, which Rick waved off. "Keep it for the coffee earlier." "Sir, that was free." "I know. Consider it a tip." Brian gathered the lockbox and the case containing the pistol. "Let me walk you out, help you get this situated." They moved toward the door together, Brian carrying the equipment, Rick moving with that same unhurried pace. The evening air hit cool and crisp when they stepped outside, temperature having dropped 15 degrees since sunset. Main Street sat empty streetlights, casting pools of yellow on pavement, a few porch lights visible in the residential blocks beyond downtown. Rick's truck occupied the space directly in front, a 2006 Ford F250 Super Duty in white paint, dulled by weather and used bed, showing dents and scratches from years of hauling equipment and materials. The odometer would read somewhere north of 187,000 miles. Brian opened the passenger door, set the lockbox and case on the bench seat with care. Neither man moved to leave. They stood in the parking lot separated from the shop's interior by 20 feet, and a closed door occupying the particular privacy that comes from being outside in a small town after dark. Brian's voice, when he spoke, carried none of the authority he'd used inside, just raw uncertainty. "Sir,
Can I ask you something?
Rick leaned against the truck's quarter panel, arms crossed loosely.
Go ahead.
"Why'd you open a gun shop? You could have done anything after leaving the service. Why this?" Brian looked at the storefront, the sign above the door, reading Thompson Firearms and Outdoor in letters he'd painted himself. "Because of you." Rick's eyebrows rose fractionally. "After Helmand, I couldn't go back to normal life. Tried construction, lasted 6 months. Felt empty. Tried college on the GI Bill, couldn't focus. Dropped out after 1 semester. He kicked at loose gravel, the sound harsh in the quiet. Then I remembered something you said once. We were at FOB Delhi, waiting for transport back to Bagram after the extraction. You were sitting on sandbags cleaning your rifle, and I asked you what you were going to do when you retired." Rick's expression suggested he remembered the conversation. "You told me find work that matters, help people do it right. 3 rules, simple but complete." Brian gestured toward the shop. "So I opened this place. I help people protect their families, train them on safety, teach them respect, treat every customer like they matter because they do. It's not saving 50 guys from a kill box, but it's honest work, and it helps people. And I do it as right as I know how. That's good work, important work." Brian's throat tightened. "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know." Rick's next words came carefully, as though he were navigating terrain he knew to be unstable. "Brian, I never told you this, but David wanted to be like you." Brian's head snapped up, confusion evident. "Like me, you were his team leader in Iraq, 2009, before Fallujah. He wrote letters home talking about Staff Sergeant Thompson, how you taught him to stay calm under fire, how you always took care of your soldiers first." The color drained from Brian's face so completely he swayed. "Wait, David Miller was your son. PFC David J. Miller? That's right. 1st Infantry Division." Brian's breath came in gasps, his hand reaching out to steady himself against the truck. "Oh, God. Sir, I didn't know. I should have kept him safe. I was his NCO, his team leader. I was responsible for him, and I—" Rick's voice cut through the spiral, firm but not harsh. "Stop." Brian's mouth closed, eyes wide. "You didn't kill David. The war did. An IED killed David, not you. And you taught him well. He died doing his job, being a good soldier, following training. That's not your fault." Brian's face crumpled, tears streaming. "I think about him sometimes, all the guys we lost. I see their faces, and I wonder what I could have done differently, what I missed, what signs I didn't see." Rick's hand landed on Brian's shoulder, the contact grounding. "I know. I think about him every day, every single day. But carrying guilt for things you couldn't control doesn't honor his memory. It just makes his death hurt you twice." Brian wiped his face with his palms, breathing ragged. "Sir, do the nightmares ever stop?" The question hung between them, heavy with shared understanding. Rick's response came with the weight of experience. "No. But they get quieter. You learn to live with them. You find people who understand Susan, your family, other veterans. You don't carry it alone." He squeezed Brian's shoulder once, then released. "The nightmares are the price we pay for coming home when others didn't. And we pay it because we have to, because the alternative is dishonoring their sacrifice by wasting the life they gave us." Brian nodded, composing himself with visible effort. They stood in silence for a moment, two men bound by circumstances neither had chosen, but both had survived. "Sir, thank you for everything, for Helmand, for today, for what you just told me about David. You earned your own way, Brian. I just showed you the path." They shook hands again, the grip firm and sustained, communicating things that didn't need words. "If you ever need anything, you call me, all day or night." Rick accepted the offer with a nod. "Same to you. Tell Susan I said hello." "I will." Rick climbed into the truck, the diesel engine turning over with a rough cough before settling into its characteristic rumble. Brian stepped back, watching as the F-250 backed out carefully, turned onto Main Street, and accelerated away with the measured pace of someone who'd learned long ago that rushing rarely helped. When Brian re-entered the shop, he found the others exactly where he'd left them. Mark still sat near the front window. Jonathan had claimed a stool by the ammunition display. Stephen stood at ease near the counter. Ed, Tim, and Jacob occupied their various positions, looking like students waiting for a teacher to resume a lecture. Mark spoke first, his voice carrying the particular authority of someone used to having the last word. "Boys, I want you to remember something. I've commanded hundreds of soldiers over my career. Good men, brave men, dedicated professionals who served with honor." He paused, making sure they were listening. "But men like Richard Miller rare. Not because of the medals, not because of the combat record, not because of the lives saved, because of character." Mark stood using his cane for leverage. He could have walked out when you mocked him, could have demanded an apology, thrown his rank in your faces, made you feel small. Instead, he sat quietly and let you learn. That's not weakness, that's strength beyond anything physical. Jonathan added his perspective, the mechanic's practicality cutting through Mark's formality. "I've known Rick for 40 years, never once heard him brag, never once heard him demand respect, but everyone who knows him respects him anyway." He looked directly at Jacob, because respect isn't demanded, it's earned, and Rick's earned it every day of his life by being consistent, honest, and present when people need him. Stephen Scott's contribution came quieter, but carried its own weight. "I spent 7 years in the Rangers, saw combat in the Gulf, worked with some of the best soldiers this country produces, and I can tell you that the best ones, the ones who really matter, are the ones you never hear about." His attention shifted to include all 3 young men. They don't write books or give interviews or speak at conferences. They just do the work, train the next generation, and go home to their families. Richard Miller is one of those. You won't see him on the news or read about him in magazines, but the people who served with him will tell their children about him. That's the legacy that matters. Ed stood the movement abrupt, driven by something he could no longer contain. "Mr. Miller isn't here, but I need to say this anyway. I'm going to change. Starting tomorrow. Starting with the next customer who walks through that door. I'm going to stop judging people by appearance and start treating everyone like they deserve respect." His voice firmed. "Because if I can be that wrong about someone this important, I can be wrong about anyone." Tim's contribution came softer, but no less sincere. "Sir, I meant what I said earlier. If Mr. Miller needs help on the farm, I know welding fabrication equipment repair. I'd be honored to help. No charge, just a chance to learn from someone like him." Brian smiled slightly. "I'll pass that along when I see him next. He'll appreciate the offer." Jacob had been silent through all of this, but now he rose facing Brian directly. "Boss, I'm going to talk to my mom tonight. Tell her about today, about Mr. Miller, about David." His voice strengthened. "And I'm going to ask her about volunteering at the VA. Those veterans need to see that young people care, that we haven't forgotten them. I want to help." Brian's expression shifted through surprise to approval. "That's good, Jacob. Really good. They need people like you." Jacob's face showed he didn't quite believe that yet, but he nodded anyway. "I want to be better. Today showed me I have a lot of work to do." The bell chimed again, someone trying the locked door peering through the glass. Brian moved to unlock it, then stopped when he recognized the figure outside. He opened the door, and Susan Miller stepped through. At 61, she carried herself with the particular grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime balancing strength and gentleness. Her height put her at 5'5", build slender, but not fragile, the kind of frame that suggested endurance over power. Honey blonde hair touched with silver fell to her shoulders, natural and unstyled. Her eyes, a distinctive shade of green that caught light like glass, scanned the shop with friendly curiosity. She wore working clothes, jeans that had actually seen work, a floral blouse in blue and pink that looked like something bought for comfort rather than fashion, a denim jacket over top, and boots that matched Rick's for practical wear. Her hands, like her husband's, showed evidence of decades spent working rather than decorating. "Rick, you ready? We still need to stop at the feed store before Gary closes." Brian stepped forward, hand extended. "Mrs. Miller, I'm Brian Thompson. It's an honor to meet you." Susan's handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "Brian Ricks told me it about you. You were in his unit in Afghanistan." "Yes, ma'am, Helmand Province." Her expression shifted to something warmer. "He talks about you boys sometimes. Not often, he's not much for war stories, but sometimes at night before bed he'll mention names. Yours comes up. He says you all did good out there." Brian's throat tightened, unable to formulate an adequate response. Susan seemed to understand, moving past the moment with practiced ease. "Is he here?" "Just left. Walked him out to his truck about 10 minutes ago." She frowned, surprised. "I told him I'd pick him up, save him driving into town twice in one day." "He picked up the pistol, ma'am. Probably wanted to get it home secured properly." Susan's expression cleared. "Oh, that makes sense. He's particular about firearm safety. Probably wanted the lockbox installed in the bedroom before I even saw the thing." She noticed the 3 young men watching her, offered them the same warm smile she'd given Brian. "You boys work here?" Ed found his voice first. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Ed Harris. This is Tim Clark and Jacob Walker." Susan crossed to shake each of their hands in turn, treating them with the same courtesy she'd shown Brian. "It's nice to meet you. Brian's doing good work with this place. Rick always says it's important to have a gun shop run by someone who understands responsibility." Jacob's response came quiet, weighted with everything he now knew. "Your husband's an impressive man, ma'am." Susan's laugh came easy, affectionate. "He has his moments. Mostly he's just stubborn and set in his ways. But yes, he's a good man." She turned back to Brian. "I assume you helped him pick out something appropriate." "Yes, ma'am. Smith & Wesson M and P9. Good ergonomics, manageable recoil, reliable platform." "Perfect. I've been nervous since those kids tried breaking in last month. Having something easier to handle than Rick's old Remington will help me sleep better." Brian's expression showed he hadn't known about the attempted break-in. "Someone tried to break into your place?" Susan nodded, unconcerned. "2 teenagers, probably. Saw the farmhouse, figured it was empty or occupied by easy targets. I was alone. Rick was in the barn. They tried the back door around 10 at night. Her voice steadied. I grabbed Rick's 12-gauge from the closet, chambered around loud enough they could hear it through the door, and informed them that I grew up on a cattle ranch and knew exactly how to use what I was holding. They left. Fast. Ed made a sound between a laugh and a cough. Susan smiled. Sheriff came out, filed a report, but the kids were long gone. Rick's been worried about me ever since. Hence the new pistol. She glanced at the clock. Speaking of Rick, I should get going. He's probably pacing at the farm, wondering where I am. Brian walked her to the door. Ma'am, it was truly an honor meeting you. The honor's mine. Brian, take care of yourself. And if you're ever out our way, stop by for coffee. Rick would like that. I will, ma'am. Thank you. Susan left with a final wave, the bell chiming her departure. The shop settled into quiet again, this time carrying a different quality, not the shock of revelation or the weight of confession, but something closer to resolution. How many times have we dismissed someone because they didn't look impressive? How many Rick Millers have we walked past without a second thought? Mark gathered his coat, preparing to leave. Gentlemen, I should head home, but before I go, every person who walks through that door has a story you don't know. Some stories matter more than others, but you'll never know which ones unless you bother to ask. He departed with the same deliberate care he'd entered, cane tapping against the floor, the sound fading as he moved down the sidewalk outside. Jonathan followed shortly after, clasping Brian's shoulder in passing. Good seeing you, Brian. Tell Rick I'll stop by the farm next week, see if he needs help with anything. Will do. Stephen was last, offering a final nod to Brian and the three employees. Remember what you learned today. It matters. The door closed behind him, leaving just Brian, Ed, Tim, and Jacob in the shop. The clock showed 6:53, almost 7 hours since Rick had first walked through the door. A lifetime compressed into a single afternoon. Brian moved to flip the sign from closed back to open, then stopped. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Tonight, they all needed time to process what had happened. Go home, boys. Think about today. Come back Monday ready to be better. They didn't argue, didn't protest the lost hour of work. Ed gathered his jacket. Tim shut down the computer properly. Jacob straightened the ammunition display one final time, making sure everything sat exactly where it belonged. As they filed out, each one paused to shake Brian's hand, acknowledging something they couldn't quite articulate, but understood nonetheless. 2 weeks later, on Veterans Day, the 11th of November, Rick returned to Thompson Firearms and Outdoor. The shop was busier than usual, the holiday bringing out customers who normally put off purchasing ammunition or accessories. Brian worked the counter. Tim helped a middle-aged couple select a rifle scope. Ed processed paperwork for a shotgun purchase. But Jacob's station stood empty. Rick entered at 10:15, the bell announcing his arrival. Brian's face lit up immediately. Mr. Miller, good to see you, sir. Rick approached the counter, nodding greetings to Tim and Ed in passing. Brian, boys. Ed abandoned his paperwork, crossing to shake Rick's hand. Sir, it's good to see you again. Tim followed, offering the same courtesy. Rick accepted their greetings with the same neutral courtesy he showed everyone, but something in his posture suggested he appreciated the respect more than he'd admit. Brian gestured toward the empty workstation. Jacob's not here today, sir. He's at the VA hospital in Grand Island. Rick's eyebrows rose slightly. Hospital? Is he all right? Brian smiled. He's volunteering. Started last week, 2 days a week, Tuesday and Thursday. Recreation therapy plays cards with vets, listens to their stories, helps with activities. Rick's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, approval showing in the slight relaxation of muscles around his eyes. "That's good. Real good," Tim added, enthusiasm evident. His mom says he's different now, in a good way. Comes home from his shifts and actually talks about what he heard, asks questions about PTSD and treatment options. He's learning. Rick nodded, once the gesture carrying weight. Everyone should spend time listening to veterans. Keeps perspective. Brian pulled a box of federal HST from beneath the counter. "I assume you're here for more ammunition. Or did Susan send you for something specific?" "Just wanted to pick up another box of defensive rounds, and I wanted to thank you again for the help 2 weeks ago." "Sir, that's our job, and honestly, you taught us more that day than we could ever repay." Rick's attention shifted to something on the wall behind the counter, a new addition that hadn't been present during his previous visit. A wooden sign, hand-carved from oak, stained dark with letters, routed deep enough to cast shadows. "Respect every customer. You don't know their story." Below it, in smaller letters, "In honor of Sergeant Major Richard Miller." Rick stared at the sign for several seconds, expression unreadable. "Brian, you didn't need to do that." "Yes, I did. Every person who walks in here reads that sign. And when they ask about it, and they do ask, we tell them why it's there." Brian's voice firmed. "We tell them about a man who walked in wearing work boots and a John Deere cap, got mocked by employees who should have known better, and taught us the most important lesson we'll ever learn about respect." Rick looked uncomfortable with the attention, but he didn't argue further. The bell chimed. An elderly man entered 70s, wearing a worn Carhartt jacket and muddy boots, moving with the careful shuffle of someone whose knees had given up smooth operation years ago. He looked exactly like what he was, a farmer or rancher who'd spent decades working outdoors. Tim immediately moved to intercept his approach, professional and courteous. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" The old man seemed surprised by the greeting, as though he'd expected something different. "I need some 30-30 Winchester. Deer season coming up." "Absolutely. We have Federal and Hornady in stock. Do you have a preference?" "Federal's always treated me right." "Great choice. How many boxes?" "3 should do it." Tim guided him toward the ammunition section, and Rick watched the interaction with the particular attention of someone evaluating whether words had translated into action. Brian noticed, offering quiet commentary. "They're different now, all 3 of them. Ed asks every customer their name, uses it in conversation. Tim offers help instead of waiting to be asked. And Jacob, when he's here, treats everyone like they matter." He paused. "That sign isn't just for customers, it's for us too. Reminder that we can always do better." Rick's response came quiet. "That's all anyone can ask." The transaction at the ammunition section completed smoothly, Tim treating the elderly customer with the same courtesy and attention he'd give to anyone else. The man left with his 3 boxes of 30-30, looking slightly bemused by the level of service. Brian rang up Rick's purchase, 1 box of Federal HST, $40 even. Rick paid cash, waved off the change again. Tim approached after the elderly customer departed. "Mr. Miller, I meant what I said before about helping on the farm. Spring's coming up in a few months. If you need welding work or equipment repair, I'd be happy to help." Rick studied him for a moment. "Fence needs work. Western property line about half a mile. Posts are rotting, wires rusted. Could use someone who knows what they're doing." Tim's face lit up. "I can do that. Just let me know when. Come April, when the ground thaws, I'll call." The offer hung there casual on the surface, but carrying the weight of trust underneath. As Rick prepared to leave, Brian walked him to the door. "Sir, Susan mentioned you might be interested in the range day next month. Platte Valley Gun Club is hosting a veterans-only shoot. No charge, just range time and fellowship. I thought you might enjoy it." Rick considered the invitation. "Maybe. I'll talk to Susan about it. If you do come, I'll be there. Would be good to shoot with you again, this time without people trying to kill us." Rick's mouth twitched almost a smile. That would be an improvement. They shook hands at the door, and Rick departed with the same unhurried pace he'd used for everything else, climbing into the white F250 and driving away into late morning traffic. Brian watched until the truck disappeared around the corner, then returned to his shop, his employees, his business built on principles taught by a man who'd probably forgotten the conversation that had shaped them. 12 miles outside Haven Ridge, the Miller farm occupied a rectangle of land that stretched from County Road 18 on the south to Miller Creek on the north. 160 acres purchased in 2013 with Rick's military retirement savings and a small agricultural loan that had been paid off within 6 years. The farmhouse dated to 1947, white clapboard with green shutters, a covered porch wrapping 3 sides, roof that had been reshingled in 2016. The red barn behind it needed paint, a project perpetually scheduled for next year, but remained structurally sound, housing equipment and supplies rather than livestock. A chicken coop sat beyond the barn, home to 24 hens that provided eggs and entertainment in equal measure. A machine shed, newer construction from 2015, sheltered the tractor and implements too valuable to leave exposed to weather. The fields showed evidence of recent harvest corn stubble in the eastern 100 acres, the western 60 already tilled under for winter. Come spring, they'd reverse soybeans where corn had been corn, where soybeans had grown, the rotation, maintaining soil health and preventing pest establishment. Rick and Susan sat on the front porch in matching rocking chairs they'd bought from a furniture maker in Grand Island 7 years prior. The wood had weathered to a silvery gray that matched the porch boards. Coffee mugs rested on the wide armrests, steam rising in the November air that carried the particular crispness of approaching winter. 6:42 sunset, painting the western sky in shades of orange and pink that would last maybe 10 more minutes before fading to purple and then black. Temperature had dropped to 48 degrees, cold enough to appreciate the warmth of coffee and the shared space of companionship. Susan spoke first, her voice carrying the comfortable ease of someone who'd asked this question 1,000 times and knew the answer would come when it was ready. How was town good? Picked up ammunition. Saw Brian and the boys. How are they learning? Jacob's volunteering at the VA now? 2 days a week. Susan smiled, rocking gently. That's wonderful. His mother must be proud. Rick's agreement came wordless, just a slight nod that meant yes, but didn't require elaboration. Brian put up a sign. What kind of sign? Rick described it, the words, the dedication, the placement behind the counter where every customer would see it. Susan's hand reached across the gap between their chairs, finding his fingers intertwining with the ease of 3 decades together. That's a good tribute. Feels excessive. It's not. You changed how they see people. That matters. They sat in silence, watching the sunset, progress, the sky shifting through its inevitable transformation from day to night. A hawk circled high above the southern field, probably hunting mice in the stubble. The chickens had already put themselves to bed in the coop, their internal clocks more reliable than any alarm. Susan's next words came carefully, touching on ground they'd covered before, but never quite exhausted. "I was thinking about David today." Rick's hand tightened slightly on hers. "Yeah, he'd be 38 now, probably married, maybe children. We'd be grandparents." Rick's voice went quiet. "Maybe. Do you think he'd be proud of you, of what you've done?" Rick was silent for a long moment, watching the hawk complete another lazy circle before heading east toward the creek. "I hope so. I tried to do right by him, tried to teach him what mattered, but I wasn't there enough. Missed too much. Can't change that now." Susan squeezed his hand. "You did everything you could, Rick. David knew you loved him. That's what matters." They sat holding hands as the sunset faded, stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. The Big Dipper hung low over the northern horizon, Orion rising in the east. The same stars that had been there when Rick was deployed, when David was alive, when the world made sense in ways it no longer did. Inside the farmhouse, visible through the window above the kitchen sink, the Smith & Wesson M&P 9 sat on the table in its case lockbox beside it. Rick would move it to the bedroom safe before they went to sleep, install the cable lock, secure it properly. The gun would probably never be fired except at the range never needed for its intended purpose. But it was there, ready just in case. Just like Rick had been ready that afternoon in Helmand Province when everything went wrong and someone needed to know how to read dirt and see history and find paths where maps said none existed. Have you ever met someone like Rick? Someone who changed your life without even trying? The quiet heroes who never ask for recognition but deserve to be remembered. Share their story. Honor the ones who served, who sacrificed, who came home different than they left and never complained about the cost. And if this story made you think twice about the stranger on the bus, the old man at the grocery store, the farmer in the feed store, remember that everyone carries a story you don't know. Everyone deserves respect. Everyone matters. The strongest people Rick Miller had ever known never needed to raise their voice. They just lived with dignity, did their work, went home to their families. That's not just a lesson about veterans or soldiers or combat. That's a lesson about being human in a world that makes it too easy to judge, too simple to dismiss, too comfortable to assume. And sometimes the best thing we can do is sit quietly, listen carefully, and remember that the most important stories are the ones people don't tell unless you bother to ask.